It was an otherwise peaceful Tuesday morning, just 2 days before the summer holidays, when terror struck this elementary school in rural South Texas. No one thinks it will ever happen to them, that suddenly you'd be that parent rushing to school, desperate for news of your child. Some were lucky, others waited in agony. In all too familiar images, police rushed to the scene after reports of shooting at Robb Elementary School in the heavily Latino town of Uvalde at around 11:30 yesterday morning. The gunman, named as 18-year-old Salvador Ramos, crashed his car into an outside gate and was seen wearing black body armor and carrying a rifle before entering the school, where he opened fire on a fourth-grade classroom, sending panicked children diving under their desks for cover, while some scrambled through windows to escape.
We had a specialized tactical team arrive. They heard the gunfire. They were met with gunfire as they encountered this gunman who was able to shoot 2 police officers. The gunman was able to make entry into a classroom, barricaded himself inside that classroom, and then that's when he just started shooting children and the teachers that we talked about, 2 teachers that were killed inside that classroom.
Ramos barricaded himself inside the classroom but was eventually shot and killed by officers on the scene. His motives so far remain unknown, but it's reported he bought 2 rifles just days after his 18th birthday earlier this month. He was a local and lived with his grandmother, though before his rampage began, he shot and injured her too. In all, 19 children aged between 9 and 10, and all from the same classroom, were gunned down, along with 2 teachers. Among them, 10-year-old Amerie Jo Garza and her classmate Javier Lopez, who just hours before had been celebrated at the school's end-of-term ceremony, and 44-year-old Eva Mireles, a teacher of 17 years. It was the most deadly school shooting in nearly a decade, when 26 were massacred at Sandy Hook Elementary, the majority of them 5- and 6-year-olds, and was the second time in just over a week that America was forced to reckon with the horrors of a mass shooting after another young man targeting black shoppers left 10 people dead in upstate New York.
To lose a child is like having a piece of your soul ripped away. I am sick and tired of it. We have to act.
A visibly angry Joe Biden addressed the nation shortly after landing from his 5-day trip to Asia and asked the question that's been asked in America so many times before.
When, in God's name, we do what we all know in our gut needs to be done, why are we willing to live with this carnage? Why do we keep letting this happen? Where in God's name is our backbone?
The president's frustration born of the knowledge that no matter how harrowing the images and how loud the cries for gun control, America's bitter partisan politics ensures that nothing ever changes. The Second Amendment right to bear arms sacrosanct for those on the right, as those on the left pointedly reminded the nation again today.
If the slaughter of school children can't convince Republicans to buck the NRA, what can we do? We just need some brave Republicans to stand athwart history and yell, stop.
Yes, we got it. It's okay. We're right here. We're right here. Okay? It's okay. We're right here, okay?
Republicans, like the Texas governor, do offer sympathy, but sympathy won't bring back the children whose lives were gruesomely snatched away yesterday, or comfort the families having to come to terms with the latest senseless horror, knowing that their children's lives have been lost, but that it will likely make no difference at all.
Well, in the last hour, the Republican Governor Greg Abbott has been giving a press conference here in which he blamed the problem of mental illness, he said, in this community for what happened at this school behind me yesterday. Making painstaking efforts to give addresses and phone numbers for agencies that community members and school members could go to seek help. And at one dramatic moment, his Democratic governor contender, Beto O'Rourke, marched up to the stage and started heckling Greg Abbott and the assorted lawmakers and politicians sitting alongside him, essentially telling them, what happened here, Mr. Governor, is on you. Let's hear a moment of that altercation now.
Sir, you're out of line. Sir, you're out of line. auditorium. I can't believe you're a sick son of a that would come to a deal like this to make a political issue.
First Amendment, freedom of speech.
The point he was making is that Greg Abbott and other Republicans have blocked at every step of the way measures to control gun violence in this country, underscoring the very bitter partisan divide evident even here today, a day after the massacre of 19 students and 2 teachers in the school behind me.
Siobhan Kennedy in Uvalde. It is now the case that in the United States, the biggest killer of children is guns, not cars or cancer. And when it comes to school shootings, the US leads the world. In the 10 years since 26 people were shot dead in the Sandy Hook massacre, there have been another 242 school shootings, including this week's horror in Texas. But not all resulted in fatalities. In that time, there were 2 school shootings in Canada and there were 2 in France. There have been none in the UK. Gun laws were tightened here in the wake of the Dunblane massacre in 1996, where 16 primary school pupils were killed. As Kieran Moodley reports, that seems very unlikely to happen, even now in the US.
I can only say tonight that the prayers of the American people are with you. Thank you very much.
The majority of those who died today were children. Beautiful little kids between the ages of 5 and 10 years old.
No child, no teacher should ever be in danger in an American school.
I'd hoped when I became president, I would not have to do this again.
Imagine if this was your child's school, now a byword for gun violence. Top of a league table that shouldn't even exist. And imagine after all of this, the pro-gun lobby became more entrenched, even as guns became the leading cause of death for American children in 2020.
I would normally say in a moment like this, we would all say naturally that our hearts break, but our hearts keep getting broken.
This American pandemic began in Littleton, Colorado. 2 students at Columbine killed 12 classmates and a teacher in 1999. CCTV showed teenagers rushing to hide. In the aftermath, the debate was about student angst and violent video games, not gun control.
And we do know we have to do more to recognize the early warning signs that are sent before children act violently.
An earlier law that banned the manufacture of assault weapons was even allowed to expire. And so in the last 2 decades, gun production has tripled and there are now around 400 million guns in the United States. 60 million more guns than people. How do you change that when this doesn't?
We heard like shots and everybody went on the ground and Miss Martin just closed the door and we went to the corner.
During the morning announcements on the Sandy Hook tannoy in 2012, gunshots were heard. The sound of the murder of 25 and 6-year-olds in 2 separate classrooms, 6 teachers alongside them. The killer left just 1 wounded survivor. Everyone else who was hit died. It shattered the American psyche, an elementary school now on the front line. And yet not enough to pass a law to expand background checks on most gun sales. That failed in the Senate. A shameful day for Washington, the president said.
They blocked common sense gun reforms, even while these families looked on from the Senate gallery.
President Obama and Mayor Bloomberg are pushing gun control.
The NRA, the powerful gun lobby, was against that law, pushing their allies in Washington to reject it.
80% of police say more background checks will have no effect.
And so more mass shootings and more in schools. The most notable before today, the 17 killed in Parkland, Florida in 2018.
By the entrance to Westglades on the west side of the school.
That also showed the diverging views on this issue, even among the victims' families.
King David Cemetery, that's where I go to see my kid now.
Andrew Pollock lost his daughter and now calls for not fewer guns, but more armed guards in schools. A line repeated today by the Texas Attorney General.
potentially arm and prepare and train teachers and other administrators to respond quickly.
So America looks set to not change, unlike in the UK. After Dunblane, new laws ban the private ownership of most handguns.
Here in the United States, we have the kind of gun violence we saw today far too often.
And in New Zealand, following the mosque shootings, new gun laws were passed less than a month later.
All I can reflect is we are a very pragmatic people. When we saw something like that happen, everyone said never again. And so then it was incumbent on us as politicians to respond to that.
Yet few think American politicians will respond the same way. It could even be going in the other direction, because the Supreme Court is expected to overturn one of America's few long-standing gun control laws in just a few weeks, presumably just days after the children of Uvalde are buried.
Kieran Moodley reporting there. Earlier, I spoke with 17-year-old Mia Tretter. Mia was shot in the abdomen in a shooting at Saugus High School in California in November 2019. She spoke about it at the White House last month, where she met President Biden to talk about the need for gun law reform. But 6 weeks later, she, like countless other survivors, has had to witness another school shooting. I asked her how that feels.
I'm devastated. I'm devastated that this continued to happen after Columbine. I'm devastated nothing has changed. And in fact, school shootings have only risen. This can't keep happening. And it happened to me, and now it's happened to these little kids. I have a brother that age, and I can't imagine what they're going through, not even understanding.
What was your experience and what happened in your school?
I was a freshman at Saugus High School, and I was shot in the lower abdomen in a school shooting. Next to me, my best friend was killed. This isn't about me, though. This is about the 21 families with now an empty chair at their dining room table and the 19 kids who couldn't come home yesterday. There's thousands of other kids and parents and families like me that this has happened to, and it feels as though people who are making these laws and kind of creating the atmosphere we live in care more about guns than they do us.
You met with Biden last month, didn't you? What did you ask him for? What did you tell him to do? Because essentially he does have power. He's supposedly the most powerful man in the world.
I asked for change. I asked him to put in regulations that limit this from happening. Universal background checks are huge. It shouldn't be a quick and easy thing. I have tried to get my driver's license 3 times and I failed all 3 times. It should be harder to get a gun than a license for a car.
And just Mia, what is it like in the aftermath of a shooting at your school? What does it feel like? How different is it afterwards? How different are you now that you have gone through this?
I can't speak for someone who has lost a child. I'm not a parent, and that has never happened to me. But knowing what it's like to be shot and knowing what it's like to then go back to that same school, I wouldn't wish it on anyone. And it's awful. And I think I'm a completely different person. I think almost everyone at that school is a completely different person. And there's the butterfly effect of this trauma that no one really thinks about. You have the grandma who dropped me off at school that day. You have my parents. You have the girl who was standing in the quad who saw something. You have the kid who was sitting at home wishing they were there because they maybe could have done something. It's a whole cycle that a community has now changed.
What is it like for you to hear when politicians say, the answer is we need more guns?
It's ridiculous. I think the arm all teachers narrative or like have more guns there or open carry is, you're making the problem worse. You're normalizing guns. You're normalizing these killing machines.
Will this mark a shift? Will this incident now make a change?
I hope that it causes a shift. I wish we didn't have to wait for this to happen and more school shootings to happen for this change. But unfortunately, it did. So now that it has happened, there has to be change before there's another.
Mia Tretta, thank you very much for talking to us. Thank you.
Thank you.